I'll start all over. Dr. Rosemary Rumbley is Dallas's most sought-after speaker. She has written 4 books, is an accomplished actress, and knows Dallas better than anyone in town. Now, over 80 years old, Rosemary appears over 300 times a year, telling stories and keeping you laughing. And I can vouch for that. So please help me welcome Rosemary Rumbley.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Whoa, there we go. Remember, it's rise, stabilize, and then mobilize. Now, I don't know if this works or not. It works.
It may not be, it's not on. Do you want to use it? There's one button. There you go.
Make it easier for myself.
Okay, good.
I won't work as hard. Oh, too loud?
That's good. That's good.
No, I don't like it around my ears. Well, wait a minute. No, this is great. Just so I lean. Is this loud enough, soft enough, or this is just right?
Just right.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This year I appeared once again, the 10th time at the Senior Follies. And last year I was in the Follies. I've been 10 years. Last year was the first year on the walker. That's my walker over there, the one with the purse on it. And last year I said, I'm on a walker, have a walker and a cane. I'm like a guy that wears a belt and suspenders. I take no chances. Well, this year I had to have a new joke. So I came up with the WWW. And my daughter was with me. We had the act together, and she said, World Wide Web? No, women with walkers. So, deal with the Senior Follies. Well, I was going to bring a Sunday school lesson to you, but I discovered your marvelous teacher is here this evening. So I will leave the Bible to your teacher and the preaching to your marvelous minister. And I'll bring you the history, I thought you'd enjoy this, the history of the Baptists in Texas. Now, I decided on that when I got my plate. Did everybody notice you got a Texas plate? Well, I keep up with the decor, so I thought I'd bring that to you. I have just finished writing. It was published July 29th, this past July 29th, the history of the First Baptist Church, downtown Dallas. Now, the reason my beloved pastor, Robert Jeffress, invited me to write that story is because I'm one of the few living people that knew Dr. George W. Truett. He came in 1897 to Dallas. I didn't know him then. But Dr. Truett served from 1897 to 1944. But I've gone way too far. We need to go back to the very beginning of Texas. Where are the native Texans? Anybody? Oh, well, good. All right. Well, I'd love to know where you're from. Any native Dallas. Oh, good. Where'd you go to school? You don't.
South Oak Cliff.
South Oak Cliff.
John Neely Bryan and Oliver Wendell Holmes.
There you go. And you,
Kimball.
Dr. Justin Ford Kimball. Do you know about Dr. Kimball?
A little bit.
Well, Kimball High School is in Oak Cliff. When you live in Oak Cliff, you live in Oak Cliff O. Because people ask you where you live, and you say, I live in Oak Cliff, and they go, oh. I know. I taught at Dallas Baptist University for 12 years. And so we were we lived in Oak Cliff. My husband was the band director at David W. Carter. That's another high school in Oak Cliff. That school opened in 1966, and my husband was the first band director. I married the 1 o'clock lab band drummer from North Texas. Any North, hey, Mean Green, yeah. Well, anyway, he was a musician, played all night and taught all day. And David W. Carter is a high school in Oak Cliff. Interesting story. Dr. Carter was on the school board in Dallas, and he was the one that said, demanded that every school have a school nurse the entire time. In other words, not just on Fridays or, don't get sick till Thursday, kid, the nurse comes. But there's going to be a nurse full-time in every school. Dr. Carter brought that about to the Dallas schools. And W.T. White, the superintendent, wanted to award him for his work and named that school Dr. David W. Carter. Now, when the school opened in 1966, Dr. David W. Carter was 80 years old and barely alive, clinging to life by a thread. So W.T. White said, hurry up, get that school finished so we can roll Dr. Carter in. He looks at the school and dies. They rolled him in, he looked at the school, revived and lives 17 years. Now, Dr. Kimball has another. Dr. Kimball taught a Sunday school class at First Baptist Church for years and years. Dr. Kimball was superintendent of schools in Dallas in 1913, 14, 15, 16, way back yonder. And Dr. Kimball felt so sorry for those teachers because they were so poor. When they got sick, they just had to die. What happened to Ms. So-and-so? Dead. Did she go to the hospital? No, couldn't afford it. So Dr. Kimball took a quarter every month from every teacher and put it in a bag, those quarters, took them down to Baylor Hospital, called it the Baylor Plan. In other words, he created hospitalization that had never been done. And Dr. Justin Ford Kimball created hospitalization, and that Baylor Plan became Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the headquarters will always be in Dallas because it was founded by the superintendent of schools, a good Baptist. Now, the Spanish arrived in Texas in 1517. That's remarkable. Columbus arrived in 1492. He had no idea where he was. He didn't know where he was. Where am I? He didn't know. Made 4 trips, had no idea where he was any of the time. And by 1517, Cabeza de Vaca landed in Texas, down near Beaumont, Port Arthur, near that area. Anybody from that area? Please testify. I see your hand, bless you. We Baptists testify. We love testimonies. Which one? Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange?
Bridge City.
Okay, right there in that,
Orange Bridge City.
that marvelous. By the way, interesting situation. Those Spanish ships came all the way from Spain, and they were in bad shape when they arrived at the Gulf Coast there, and they had to repair them. And that oil there, see, that's big time oil, was floating on the water of that Gulf. They saw that oil floating there, and they knew to skim that oil off, make it into a little paste, and stick it in the holes of those ships. See, they knew that. Now, they learned that from Moses' mama. She had to save that baby, Moses. She did it by weaving a little basket, floated him down the river. Baskets do not float. His did, because the Bible tells us she lined it with pitch and tar. Pitch and tar, that's oil, see. And so Moses' mother, well, she brought that first well in over there in the Middle East. Mobil, Exxon, they came later. So they knew that about that oil floating, and they stuck it in their ships. And Cabeza de Vaca came, and they were greeted by the Indians, and they ate corn, tomatoes, barbecued goat. They'd never seen barbecue, they'd never seen tomatoes. They were totally taken by the foods these Indians were eating. So actually, when Cabeza de Vaca came all the way to El Paso, anybody from that area? Isleta, that little town? Isleta?
3 years.
Yeah, Isleta, thank you for your testimony. Isleta is one of the oldest towns in Texas, and they ate barbecue goat and corn and tomato, and that was the first Thanksgiving in the New World. See, those pilgrims are 200 years later. So the first Thanksgiving was in Texas, and it was barbecued goat. None of this turkey mess. Anyway, well, Texas was filled with Comanches and Apaches, and the Mexicans really didn't want to get involved with them because they just didn't. They built their missions, and in the southern part of Texas, San Antonio, anybody from San Antonio, down south of Texas. So that northern part of Texas was filled with Comanches and Apaches. And the Spanish settled in the southern part of Texas and built the missions because they were all Catholic. That was their religion, their state religion. So that's the way it stayed until, well, 1821, when a man from Connecticut, anybody from Connecticut, feel free really, a man from Connecticut by the name of Stephen Fuller Austin went down to the Mexican government and said, may we colonize Texas. That's 1821. And the Mexican government said, you may colonize Texas. You know, in other words, we're going to let you all get killed by Indians instead of us. You may colonize Texas, provided everyone is a Catholic. And so Stephen F. Austin, wanting to bring those families in, said, yeah. Stephen F. was a Presbyterian. He said, just keep your mouth shut, people, and let's get the land, and we'll deal with religion later, see.
Let's hear it
So-
for Presbyterians.
Oh, are you a Presbyterian? You are. Well, see, I'm assuming everybody here is a Baptist. Maybe any good Catholics wander in? Yeah, I'm sorry if I left anyone out. But Stephen F. Austin grew up in Connecticut, which was a Presbyterian. Yale University, that's their Ivy League school, and so he agreed they'd all be Catholics, and they took the land. And they did well with the land. Oh yes, did very well. And then a whole bunch from Germany came. Anybody from that bunch, 1834? See, that was Kunde Landesfrei, wie kam ja. And the Germans poured in, took the hill country. See, they're still down there, New Braunfels. Yeah, where Fredericksburg, what else? Schulenburg, Akundia, Vigacha, here. And they cultivated that land, and they were all Lutherans, see. So, any Lutherans, feel free now to speak out. So, but they kept it quiet. They never really said too much about it. So that's the way it was until then in 1836, the Mexican government began to notice that all of these people had come and done well. See, Stephen F. Austin appointed a group of men that he called the Texas Rangers. They weren't baseball players, they were law enforcement. And he said, your job description is kill Indians. And they pretty well wiped out all those Indians there, and they had that land, see. So the Mexican government told them they could have it, yeah, And so that's why we as Texans got so upset when the school board down in Austin said they were going to take the word hero out of describing the Alamo heroes, because they stood for Texas independence. See? So they gave the land to these people in 1821, and they did well with it. And then the Germans came and did even better. And here we want the land back. Now, anybody from Gonzales, that's a great story. That's what the Mexicans had done. They gave the Texans a cannon to shoot Indians with. Here's a cannon, shoot Indians, okay? Well, in 1836, they got to thinking, they're going to shoot us with it. So they went after that cannon in Gonzales, and that's that flag, you've seen it with the cannon that says, come and take it. So that cannon was fired, and that really started the War of Texas Independence there in Gonzales. No one was killed. No one was killed in that battle, whatever it was, the firing of that cannon in Gonzales. Now, James Walker Fannin at Goliad, that was a massacre, because Fannin was educated at West Point, and he had his men all lined up in lines, and you don't fight in Texas that way. You get behind a mesquite tree and hit them. And they didn't fight that way, so they lost that battle. So Fannin fell, and Goliad fell, and it looked like it was all over for the Texans, Alamo, Fannin, Gonzales. But wait, salvation had come to Texas. In a 6'6" giant, he signed that Texas Declaration of Independence. That's March 2nd, 1836. March 2nd, that's Texas Independence Day. March 2nd, oh, we stop and pause and thank the Lord for March 2nd. And they signed that document. And the oldest signer of that document was Colin McKinney. And Colin McKinney was, anybody from McKinney, Collin County? Are we in Collin County?
Yeah.
Yeah. Colin McKinney was 68 years old. He was the oldest signer on March the 2nd. But there was this 6'6" giant there, drunk as he could be. But he was going to save Texas. And he signed his name, Sam Houston. Now, why was Big Sam in Texas? Interesting story. Sam Houston grew up in Virginia, was born in Virginia. Anybody from Virginia? There you go. Yeah, Presbyterian from Virginia. Greetings. Sam Houston's father died, and his mother brought the boys, all these boys, to Tennessee. Now, they're in Tennessee. They were well represented in the Alamo and Tennessee, the volunteer, no one from Tennessee. So Sam Houston grew up in Tennessee. He was a rebel, wouldn't go to school, smart as he could be, too smart for school. Where are the school teachers here, the retired or otherwise? The poverty crowd. I used to come home from school, mean teacher, Daddy. I got a mean teacher. My daddy would say, honey, those teachers aren't mean, they're hungry. They didn't know what he meant till I got that first paycheck. But nevertheless, Sam wouldn't go to school, rebel, self-taught, just a wild kid, 6'6". But what saved him was the army. He joined the army and fought in the War of 1812. The War of 1812, known as Madison's War against England. 1812, Sam Houston fought. And fought in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in Georgia. Anybody from Georgia? Yeah, you just moved around a lot, changed churches and all.
Have to move again.
Battle of Horseshoe Bend. Sam Houston was battling there with his good buddy Andy Jackson, Tennessee. And they defeated the British and the Creek Indians. See, that's where that expression came from. God willing and the creek don't rise. Yeah, that has nothing to do with water. It has to do with the tribe of Indians. And so that battle was won. And of course, Andy went on down to New Orleans. Anybody from New Orleans? Fought the Battle of New Orleans, won the war, came back to Tennessee, and was elected President of the United States of America. Now, Sam went back to Tennessee and opened a school, became a school teacher. He'd never been to school a day in his life. He just woke up, I'm a teacher, and started teaching school, and did well. And Andy's up in Washington and writes to Sam, and dear Sam, I'm here in Washington, and I need a man like you in Congress. Now you run for the House of Representatives from the state of Tennessee and come up to Washington and help me. And Sam did. Went up to Washington. Then Andy said, now go back to Tennessee and run for governor and serve as governor like I did, and then be President of the United States of America. And Sam said, okay. Went back home to Tennessee, ran for governor, won, moved into the governor's mansion. Now, Sam Houston was a womanizer. Women were coming in and out of that governor's mansion, front door, back door, side door. He just had women. And his PR people got disturbed. They said, Sam, you've got to get married. You're a womanizer. And we're grooming you for the presidency of the United States of America. And womanizers don't always make good presidents. Sam got married. One of the most beautiful women in Tennessee. Her name was Eliza Allen. She stayed with him 11 weeks and left. He ran out of that governor's mansion, said, I'm no longer governor, I'm finished, and joined the Indians and became an alcoholic. Just laid there drunk. Andy wrote him a letter, well, now you're out, you're ruined, you're finished politically, and now you're drunk. But there's something you can do for me, and you can do it drunk. Go down to Texas and bring Texas in as a state. And Sam came down to Texas, and that's why he was there on March 2nd, drunk, signing that document, and he sobered up, got a bunch of guys together, and defeated Santa Anna in the Battle of San Jacinto. Bled all over Harris County, anybody from Houston, and built a city on his blood, which he named Houston, Texas. But let's go back now. See, now Texas is a nation under Sam Houston, so they do not have to worry about religion any longer. So the first Protestant church built in Texas was a Methodist church. The Methodists were here in Texas. They had those circuit riding preachers. Did you ever join the Methodist church? Just kidding, just kidding. Any Methodist in the crowd? Oh, good, okay, used to be, whatever. The Methodist, came first into Texas. They were the first Protestants that built the church. See, they couldn't, under the Mexican rule, no churches except those missions, Catholic churches. So the Methodists built the McMahon Chapel in San Augustine, Texas. Has anyone seen it? It's a darling little chapel. It's still there in San Augustine, Texas, almost in Louisiana, over there near Nacogdoches. Where's my lady from Alto? There you are. Rosemary with two names and another Alto. Okay, so you know the McMahon Chapel in San Augustine. It has a chandelier in it that was given to the church by the governors, the first governor of Texas, James Pinckney Henderson. That's Henderson, Texas, Henderson County. James Pinckney Henderson's wife gave them a chandelier, and it's still hanging in that church. And here's the joke that goes with it. The Methodist leader said, "I hear we're getting a chandelier." Well, we're not. 3 reasons. Number 1, nobody in this church can spell chandelier. Number 2, nobody in this church can play it. And besides, what this church really needs is more light. So that was the first Protestant church in Texas, the Methodist San Augustine, the McMahon Chapel. Now, the Presbyterian, first Presbyterian, was Stephen F. Austin. See, that takes care of the Presbyterians. And then when the Germans coming, they were all Lutheran, pretty well. And those Lutheran churches are still down in the hill country. So when did the Baptists come? Well, they came from Illinois. Anybody from Illinois? This was Daniel Parker. Daniel Parker came from Illinois, Palestine, Illinois, see? And he settled in Palestine, Texas. Now, y'all that came down here from somewhere else probably noticed our Texas accent. It's a very crude accent. I majored in speech at North Texas. Speech and theater. We had this teacher, head of the speech and drama department. "Oh, students, please rid yourselves of that uncultured Texas accent, but never sound affected." See, we have this word, y'all. It means one person or many. Now, if you're referring to many, you say, "all y'all." Or as Kinky Friedman said, when 2 Texas women meet, they never say, "Oh, you look so nice." They say, "Well, look at you." So, Daniel Parker came from Palestine, Illinois, and settled at Parker's Fort. Has anyone been? It's restored, his fort there by Mahia in Palestine, Texas. Yeah, that fort's a tourist. You can visit it. And Daniel Parker. Now, Daniel Parker was never accepted by the Southern Baptist Association as the first Baptist in Texas because he came from Illinois. Where are the Yankees here? No, I'm serious. I'd love to see you all. You're a lot for you, the Robert E. Lee joke. Story of a lady from Mississippi. Anybody from Mississippi? Mississippi. This lovely lady there was from Mississippi, and she was there by the river, and there was a bridge over the river, and there was a man on the bridge over the river, and he was going to jump off. He was going to commit suicide. And she rushed over to him and she said, "No, you cannot commit suicide. Think of your wife and your children. They left me." "Oh, well then think of your mother and your father. They're dead." "Well then think of Robert E. Lee." "Who's that?" "Jump, you damn Yankee." Sorry about that. So, Daniel Parker was a predestinational regular primitive Baptist. See, that would upset any Southern Baptist. Shall I run that again? Predestinational regular primitive. That's the foot washing.
Yeah.
That's, God's gonna get you. You don't send these missionaries. He'd get you anyway. Predestinational regular primitive, the primitive Baptist. That was Daniel Parker. So he really never was counted. I'll get to the next Baptist that came. But I do want to mention that Daniel Parker built this fort, but it didn't hold back the Indians, because the Comanches in May of 1836, this was 1 month after Sam Houston had defeated Santa Anna. 1 month later, the Comanches swept down on the Parkers, killed them all, but took this one little girl, Cynthia Ann Parker, captive. And she married the chief of the Comanches. She was 13 years old. She married Nacona. Anybody been to Nacona, Texas? That's where old Joe Justin, driving cattle. "Boys, keep driving cattle. I'm going to stop here and make me a pair of boots." And he did. And they said, "Joe, why do you drive cattle? You make the best looking boots of all times." He said, "You're right." And so Joe Justin stayed in Nacona and had 4 boys, 1 girl, Miss Edna. Those 4 boys hated her. They all made boots, all the kids, all 4 boys, Miss Edna, they all made boots. And she'd embroidery in her boots for a good time, see Enid. And her brothers hated her. And they moved to Fort Worth and made Justin's. And she stayed in Nacona and made Naconas. And then John, one of the sons, put it all together in Fort Worth and bought out Tony Lama. And they have Justin's, Nacona, and Tony Lama boots in Justin Industries in Fort Worth, Texas. So Nacona was the husband, that's Weatherford, and Nacona is there in Montague County. That's Bowie, there over Munster, over in that area. And Nacona and Cynthia Ann had a son named Quanah Parker. And he finally gave up the last of the Comanche chiefs, Quanah Parker. He was a good friend of Amon Carter, of Will Rogers, of Wagoner, the Wagner Ranch. Anybody from Vernon, Electra, in that area, Wichita Falls, and Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt asked Quanah to come to Washington. "Quanah, I need you up in Washington to help me with Indian affairs." Quanah had 13 wives. Teddy said, "Go back and pick out one." Quanah said, "You go and pick out one." So the Parkers were wiped out. They were supposedly the first Baptists, but they were the predestinational regular primitive Baptists. Z.N. Morrell gets the credit of being the first Southern Baptist in Texas, and he was down in Washington on the Brazos and was eventually joined by a preacher by the name of R.E.B. Baylor. And they were the first 2 Baptist missionaries in Texas. Now let's go back and see what happens to Sam, because he's president of the Republic of Texas, where we left him, and he's still drinking heavily. And he serves 2 years as president of the republic. And then he goes on a vacation. And he vacations in Alabama. Anybody from Alabama? Good old Alabama. And it's there, Alabama, good. Sam met Margaret Lee. Sam was 46 years old and a drunk. Margaret was a 22-year-old Baptist. Her parents had founded the Alabama Baptist Convention. She was a graduate of Judson Institute. Adoniram Judson, the missionary, named that institute. She was a Baptist to the bone, as they say. 22 years old, and she fell in love with this 46-year-old drunk. She told her mother about it, who came unglued. 46-year-old drunk that's lived with Indians. She said, I don't care, Mama, I'm going to marry him. So Margaret Lee married Sam Houston, 22 years old, he's 46. He said, let's get out of Alabama. I have a city in Texas I named for myself. So they're named Houston. Let's settle there. And surely enough, they settled in Houston. And Margaret made him go to church, made Sam go to church, First Baptist Church, Houston, Texas. And then eventually Sam was led to the Lord by Rufus C. Burleson, first president of Baylor University in Waco, Texas. Anybody from Baylor? That statue stands on that Baylor campus. Even of Rufus C. Burleson, even the pigeons will not fly over that statue in great reverence of this Baptist leader. And he leads Sam to the Lord and baptizes him in the river there. And as he baptizes Sam, he said, Sam, your sins are washed away. And Sam said, God help the fish. Sam served that church and the Lord and tithed. And they had 8 children. It was a marvelous, marvelous marriage. And they lived in Huntsville. That was his beloved home. And then he served as president of the Republic again for 2 years. And then in 1846, Texas went into the Union. And Sam was our first senator. Now Sam went up to Washington as senator, 1846. He comes back in 1860. Texas, gonna be a war, it's gonna be bad. But we're not going to get in the war because we're not going to join the Confederacy. See, we're going to secede from the Union, but we're going to become a nation once again and let the North and South have a war. Now that's not a bad idea. And he was elected on that promise. But see, as time went on, these people in Texas, see, they came from somewhere. Ooh, my mother back in Georgia, ooh, she'd hate me if I were a Confederate. My sister, oh, in Alabama, oh, my brother in Mississippi, oh. So Texas voted to go into the Confederacy. It broke the heart of Sam Houston. He walked out of that governorship. Now, he did it twice. Once in Tennessee over that woman, once in Texas over the war, went to Huntsville and died of a broken heart. His last words were, my Texas and my Margaret. But he lives on I-45. Now, if you're driving south on I-45, you do not see him. He's behind a bush. But if you're driving north, Sam Houston's in the middle of that highway with a light shining on it. I know people who have found the Lord driving north on I-45. I believe. Oh, it's just Sam Houston. Let's go back a little bit because there's a great story in the Alamo, the cradle of Texas liberty. The Alamo was, well, it was filled with individuals, men, who were married, but their family was not with them. See, Travis, well, he dumped a wife and came to the Alamo. Bowie's wife died, came to the Alamo. Bonham was so young, he hadn't married yet in the Alamo. Crockett, see, he left a wife in Tennessee. He fell out with Andy Jackson. Crockett was in Congress. He was a senator, Senator Davy Crockett. Fell out with Andy Jackson, stood up and said, all of you can go to hell, I'm going to Texas. And see, his wife is buried south of Fort Worth in that cemetery in Acton, Texas. Have you ever seen Mrs. Crockett's grave? It's there. There's a statue of her. She's looking toward the Alamo, waiting for Davy. See, she owned all that property. They gave her that property because of Davy. And she lived in Granbury, and she's buried in Acton. Now, when Governor Pat Neff, he was president of Baylor University and then was governor of Texas, he's the one that established the Texas Parks and Wildlife. So he drove all over this state. There's a park, there's a park, there's a park. That's why there's a park called Mother Neff. Have you seen that sign, Mother Neff Park? Well, that's because he was naming the parks and he had a mother, and he could do that. This one's for you, Mother. Mother Neff Park. What a weird scene. Well, that's Governor Neff. Now, he comes to Acton and finds that grave. Oh, Mrs. Davy Crockett. Oh, here's a park, this cemetery. Those people in Acton said, no, you can't, no, we do not want our relatives, our grandmother in a state park. No. So he got the grave, 3 feet by 6 feet, by 3 feet by 6 feet. It's a state park. It's the smallest state park in the world. It's got a statue on it. Mrs. Davy Crockett is looking for Davy. It's got a historical marker on it. It's got a sign that says, welcome to the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Now that used to be the end of my story until a friend of mine from Hood County said, you haven't lived till someone with an RV calls and wants to know how the hookups are. Mrs. Davy Crockett, we want to spend the night in every state park. Better not this one. Now, there was a married couple with a child in the Alamo. A married couple with a child. This is Susanna and Almiron Dickinson. Now, they came from Tennessee, from Nashville. They were engaged to be married, and they fell out. I hate you, I hate you. Finished. Now, Almiron, on the rebound, became engaged to Susanna's best friend. Now, this friend was stupid because she asked Susanna to be the bridesmaid in their wedding. Now, if you're marrying somebody's ex-fiancé, don't ask the ex-fiancé to be a bridesmaid. That's dumb. And then she was dumber. She said, darling Almiron, go pick up Susanna and bring her to our wedding. And he said, okay. Knocked on the door. She answered the door. They forgot they were mad. Fell back in love. Eloped. Left a bride at the altar in Nashville. Now, when you do that, you better go to the Alamo. And that's where they were, living with their little baby, Angelina. Now, Almiron said, Susanna, I'm going to die. We're all going to die. Every one of us. We're going. But if you and the baby will hide in the baptistry, you just may make it. So they hid in the baptistry and survived that battle. And they came out of that rubble, the Alamo, destroyed, everybody killed. They come out, and Santa Anna is in shock. And he said, if you leave in a hurry, I'll let you go. And they left in a hurry. And she went to what became Houston, Texas. Now, she opened a boarding house there, and that's the end of the story for children. But the adult version goes on, because it turns out that boarding house she was running wasn't exactly a boarding house. Now, the reason we know that is that Rufus C. Burleson, remember him, the pastor that baptized Sam Houston? He went to see Mrs. Dickinson and said, Miss Dickinson, the Lord loves you, but he hates this house. Now you close it down and become a Baptist. And she did. And the little girl later married. Rufus C. Burleson performed the wedding ceremony, and Mrs. Dickinson is buried in the State Cemetery, the Lady of the Alamo. Wow. Now, anybody have any questions so far? Well, I'll finish it all with, let's see, the Baptist grew and grew and grew. And finally, a woman in 150 years old, 1868, there we go, 1868, a woman came to Dallas with her husband, Lucinda Williams, with her husband, William Williams. They came from Missouri, and they stopped in Waco and picked up a man named Stemmons, and they all came to Dallas. Now, the only church in Dallas that was established in 1868. See, Dallas was founded in 1841, so it's not very old. 1841, 51, 61, see, it's just 25 years old, this gathering. And so she and her husband came in 1868. And the only church was a Presbyterian church there, that first Presbyterian. That was the first church, Protestant church in Dallas. And so she wanted a Baptist church. They were Baptist. And 11 people met in her living room. Now, they lived on Main Street, because everybody was on Main Street in those days. There was Main Street, Dallas, Main Street. And in their living room, 11 people declared themselves the First Baptist Church of Dallas, Texas. And they had 10 pastors. Every 2 years, it seemed like they'd have another pastor until 1897. See, from 1868 to 1897, they had about 10 different pastors that would come and go. And then George W. Truett came and stayed until 1944. He was invited by John D. Rockefeller to come to Manhattan and be pastor of Rockefeller's church, the Riverside Baptist Church. But Dr. Truett said, no, I love Dallas, and he stayed in Dallas. Died in 1944. The tragic story of Dr. Truett, you may know this, he went hunting with the Dallas police chief and accidentally shot and killed the police chief of Dallas. That was a horrible point of his life, and almost gave up preaching, but they convinced him to go on. So he did. He was a great fundraiser. He saved Baylor University. In 1890, Baylor was going under. They said, there's a young man in White Rock, Texas that can save us. And George W. Truett went to Waco, saved Baylor, and then enrolled in Baylor. And then came to Dallas in 1897 and served till 1944. And then came W.A. Criswell. Now everybody, Dr. Criswell always called me a godly woman. Oh, Rosemary, you're a godly woman. And everybody worried, does he know you imitate him? I said, well, yeah, he's heard the act. He just doesn't know I'm not as godly as he. And so he came in 1944 and died in 2002. Now that church was foolish enough to think Dr. Criswell was going to retire. He wasn't. In fact, in the book, see, I wrote this history book. It was written, given as a gift. If you came to the birthday party last July 29th, you got a cupcake, a Bible, and my book. And I tell all those stories of W.A. Because I tell that his favorite hymn was, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be here. Those pastors were so foolish to think that W.A. Criswell was going to retire. He was going to retire to heaven. He told that to us year after year after year. So we had 3 pastors there in the interim, and now Robert Jeffers, who grew up at First Baptist Church. He was born at First Baptist Church, grew up, served in Eastland, Texas. Anybody from Eastland?
Where it is.
Right, good. Eastland, Texas, with the frog, old Rip in a coffin. Do y'all know that story of the frog that was in the cornerstone at Eastland, and they opened it up? What?
His daddy and his brother, 10 years old, coming out of the movie theater in
Eastland.
Huge crowd outside
Sure.
the movie theater, and it was the crowd where they were opening up
The
the time
tombstone.
capsule, and
Yeah.
that old Rip.
That frog, that toad, horny toad, really, was alive. They called him Old Rip. He traveled all over the country.
He did.
Came back and died. He's now in a coffin on a red cushion. If you don't believe this, Google Old Rip, and his picture will come up.
If they come to our
Courthouse.
anniversary party next Saturday, I've got a picture on the TV
Oh, good,
of
of Old Rip.
Rip in his little velvet
Coffin. He lies there, and the light shines on him 24/7 on the courthouse steps. Well, Robert was in Eastland, and then went to Wichita Falls, and then came to First Baptist Church. And so the Baptist came to Texas, and they definitely stayed. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, feelings, emotional upheavals, or anything of that sort? I was told to speak till 9:30. I can't do it. No, Virginia said we have to be out at 9:30. I said, I think I'll make certain you are. Anybody have any questions about Texas, Dallas? Oh, I will tell, this is cute. I need to put this in. It's in the book. The Baptist Church is on the corner of St. Paul and Ross Avenue. The Ross brothers were wine merchants. My mother was born in Dallas in 1894. So she told those stories over and over and over of Dallas, see. And I grew up with them, and I've written 7 books now. 5 on Dallas. Just Amazon. People say, did you bring your books? I barely got here on that walker. Are you kidding? Books? That's out. Amazon. They're all on Dallas primarily. But the Ross brothers were wine merchants. They were the wine dealers of Dallas, early Dallas, the Ross brothers. They named that street Ross Avenue. Now, St. Paul was named by Barnett Gibbs, Lieutenant Governor of Texas, who came to live in Dallas, built a house way out of town. Well, you're going to build a street so we can come see you? Sure. What you going to name your street? Well, I love to drink wine. And I'm going to name that street after the guy that said, drink no longer water, a little wine for thy stomach's sake. St. Paul said that in 1 Timothy. The Baptists have had to live with that scripture. And that's why that street is named St. Paul. I love to tell Dr. Criswell, did you know this church is on a wine merchant and a wine-o? Oh. So, any other thoughts, feelings, anything? Thank you so much for inviting me.